Many public health people are saying to stop testing gay men for sexually transmitted infections. I didn't say test them less, I said stop testing them altogether. I own a sexual health care company and I'm going to walk you through the debate right now. So everybody's heard of HIV, but what we're talking about today is primarily gonorrhea and chlamydia, two bacterial infections which are really common. Now, a few things you have to understand about gonorrhea and chlamydia is that they're often asymptomatic, meaning the people with them often have no idea that they have them. So the only way they're going to be detected is in what's called an STI screening. Now, a screening isn't when you run off to urgent care because you can't pee. That's when you're just getting some sort of proactive testing to make sure that you don't have one of these bacterial infections so that you're not spreading it or doing damage to your tissue. Speaking of testing, that is the missing key here in this debate. You see, 40 years ago, most people would have had no idea they had gonorrhea or chlamydia because they were asymptomatic. And we didn't have the technology to detect asymptomatic gonorrhea and chlamydia. Now, with modern PCR testing technology, the specimens can be really small in terms of quantity of bacteria and still come up as a positive result. And in the United States, when somebody tests positive for gonorrhea or chlamydia, they test positive, we diagnose them as having an infection, and we cure them with antibiotics. Now, speaking of antibiotics, this comes down to the crux of the debate. We're not going to talk about chlamydia because it doesn't really evolve very well. It's not really become resistant. Gonorrhea, on the other hand, is a very crafty little infection. It's been through 5 classifications of antibiotics, and as soon as one is developed and goes out into the world and starts curing people, gonorrhea starts figuring out a way to become resistant to it. It evolves really quickly, like I said. It's not a huge emergency right now. As a matter of fact, the FDA just approved a brand new classifications of antibiotics to treat gonorrhea in the past year, but it is an ongoing concern, and there's no reason to think that gonorrhea isn't going to continue to learn how to evolve and defeat antibiotics over time. So, because asymptomatic people can spread gonorrhea and chlamydia, it's bad to have a bunch of people out there with gonorrhea and chlamydia who are not only damaging their own tissue internally and silently, but spreading this infection to other people. It may also be bad to be needlessly treating millions of people for gonorrhea and chlamydia who were eventually going to self-resolve the infection anyway. And that's really the debate that we're having in public health in 2026. Now, you're smart or you wouldn't be watching the Shameless Care podcast, so you're probably wondering, why are we having this conversation about gay men? What about women? Well, public health folks reason that this impacts the genders differently. These infections, gonorrhea and chlamydia, can cause pelvic inflammatory disease and infertility in women. And a lot of people believe that men, particularly men who are never having sex with women, if they have a silent, lingering, small, fairly inconsequential infection like gonorrhea and chlamydia, it just doesn't make that much difference. One of the ways that it could make a difference is through HIV infection rates, because when you have a silent asymptomatic gonorrhea and chlamydia infection, it increases your risk of HIV if you come into contact with HIV. However, many gay men are on PrEP, which has reduced the risk of HIV to practically zero. Amazing, the modern miracle of our lifetime, perhaps. And that's fantastic. However, because their risk is now close to zero, the percentage impacted by gonorrhea and chlamydia, it's just not going to make a huge difference. And that's also part of the debate here. Now, while I'm talking about men and women, I have to point something out just so you learn a little bit more about how the sausage is made. These recommendations are all over the place. They're constantly changing, and they're made by human beings who are perfectly fallible, okay? For example, that gay men, it's recommended that they're screened for gonorrhea and chlamydia once a year. Young women are also recommended to be screened for those infections. But you know who's not recommended to be screened for gonorrhea or chlamydia? Heterosexual men like myself. I one time contracted gonorrhea and spread it to a woman. So gay men tested, women tested. Guys like me, don't worry about it. That's basically what the recommendations say. And it makes you wonder, who do you think is infecting all of these women with gonorrhea and chlamydia? Most of the time, it's heterosexual men. So I told you that just to point out that when we're talking about screening recommendations like this, they're not the gospel. So what do you think about this, Robert from Shameless Care? You might be asking your telephone screen right now. Well, I'll tell you. I'm not a gay man, but I think a lot of this is relevant to my life because I've already told you that the United States Preventative Services Task Force say I shouldn't be screened for gonorrhea and chlamydia at all in the first place. So the language cannot apply to my life that's going to say, get tested less, Robert. It already says, don't get tested at all, basically. But you know what? I am in charge of my own sexual health care, and I encourage you to be in charge of your own sexual health care as well. Do not let a panel of 16 people out of Washington, D.C. tell you how to get screened for STIs. I'm going to continue to get screened for STIs very proactively for the same reason I don't litter when I drive and I don't yell at pedestrians when I drive. I just don't want to be a jerk. I have spread gonorrhea before and I don't want to do that again. And so I'm going to continue to get screened myself very proactively. If I do have another bacterial STI in my lifetime, I will certainly encourage the doctor to treat that. Well, I hope everybody learned something. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk soon.